its ubiquitous 1, 2, and occasional 3-story buildings filled with tourist shops, restaurants, hotels, bars, and clubs facing east across the harborside road. The police car made its way through the port, turned right at the first road past the post office, and headed toward the mountain road leading to Patmos's ancient Kora, perhaps the most desired and beautiful village in all of Greece. During the summer, its quiet lanes and simple but elegant stone houses were home to members of Greece's former royal family, current and past government leaders, and understated wealth and power from around the world. Andreas sat behind the driver as the police car wound its way up to Kora along a 2-mile band of road lined with eucalyptus. It was Andreas's first time on the island, and like every other tourist, he couldn't help but stare down toward the port. It was an extraordinary view. Green fields and olive trees against a sapphire sea laced with muted brown-green islands running off to the horizon. A scene from antiquity. The driver said, "Locals say this is the same view as he had when he wrote the book." He paused. "And right over there is where he did it." Andreas didn't have to ask who he was. On Patmos there was only one he. They were almost halfway up the mountain, and tourist buses were parked everywhere. "The entrance to the cave is over there." The driver gestured with his head to the left. "You should see it if you have the chance." Andreas thought to remind the young cop that this was a murder investigation, not a sightseeing tour, but he let it pass. After all, this spot was hallowed ground to much of the world, the cave where St. John wrote the book of Revelation, the apocalyptic tale of the end of the world, or its beginning, depending on your point of view. "Take a look at that." It was Kouros pointing up the hill toward the monastery. It dominated the hilltop. "That's the monastery of St. John the Divine. It controls the island. What the monastery wants, it gets. What it doesn't want doesn't happen," said the driver. Andreas looked up, wondering not for the first time, why me? Yes, theoretically his unit had jurisdiction over any crime in Greece considered serious enough to warrant special attention, a unique and feared position in a politically sensitive department. But for practical purposes there was no way he could keep up with all the serious, big-time crime threatening Athens, let alone the rest of Greece. Sometimes he wondered if that might have been the plan, give him too much to do to accomplish a single thing. If so, he'd sure as hell surprised more than a few high-profile bad guys now serving time. "I've never been here," Andreas thought. "I have no connections here. Why did the minister say I'm the only one in Greece qualified to conduct this investigation?" The Byzantine thinking of his superiors never ceased to amaze him. If this was just a mugging-turned-cutthroat, as the Patmos cops had reported to the ministry in Athens, they were far more qualified than he to find the locals responsible. On the other hand, if there were something more, the ministry knew better than to expect political correctness or a cover-up from Andreas. Threats and tenders of bribes only pissed him off more. Perhaps this was one of those rare cases where politicians didn't care about scandal as long as the guilty were caught. Yeah, and maybe he should go back to believing in the tooth fairy. At the crest of the hill, just before the road began twisting down the other side of the mountain, the driver made a sharp right turn. A bus stood 150 yards ahead, waiting its turn to discharge a load of tourists and pilgrims to the monastery. There was nothing to do but wait. A man in a black baseball cap marked "Go Steelers" in gold lettering stood slowly spinning a rack of postcards outside a souvenir kiosk. From the hat and the camera around his neck, Andreas assumed he was a tourist. On any other island, he'd also assumed the man was in the midst of one of those epiphanies overwhelming to so many first-time visitors as they gazed at a host of high-from-Greece postcards adorned with nudes and body parts arranged in mind-boggling positions. But here, so close to the monastery, he doubted such commerce was allowed. Then again, this was Greece, and business was business. Once the bus moved, the car passed through a barrier prohibiting all but authorized vehicles up into a tiny town square overlooking Scala and the sea. They parked beside